We'll call this Wednesday, August 21, meeting of the Planning and Zoning and Agriculture Committee to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Olthoff? Mr. Featherling?
Present.
Mr. Washington?
Present.
Mr. Tholen? Ms. Polk?
Present.
Mr. Payton? Ms. Peters?
Present.
Ms. Dunbar? Mr. Kinzinger?
Present.
Mr. Fairfield?
Present.
Mr. Smith?
Present.
Mr. Swanson?
Present.
Mr. Dennell? Mr. Wheeler?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I haven't received any public comment sheets. Is there anyone wanting to give public comment? Seeing none, the minutes of the July 17th meeting were sent out. Any additions or corrections? Motion to approve would be in order. Mr. Kinzinger, Mr. Washington. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Building report.
Okay. In your packet is the building division report for July 2019. We had 2 new homes. Excuse me. In your packet is the monthly building division report for July 2019. For July, we had 2 new homes, a total permits of 108, and total fees collected of 24,351. The total permits are up from last year's. We had only 79 permits last year, but our revenue is down a little bit because we collected $25,015 last year.
Any questions? Motion to approve would be in order. Ms. Peters. Second by Mr. Fairfield. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Going on to zoning, ZBA case 19-05.
Stormwater.
Stormwater. Every time.
Every time, yes. So, as usual, I'm asking if any of the board members have any stormwater or MS4 issues they'd like to discuss or like to bring to our attention. We are currently working on one in River Bend subdivision out in Limestone Township.
Is that the problem we had before, right? At River Bend?
This is near the detention pond on the west side of the subdivision towards the north. It doesn't appear to be draining properly. And it looks like I don't want to go into a lot of details, but it's possible that one of the residents out there has actually altered the drainage pattern. So we're working with the health department on that.
All right. Going on to ZBA case 19-05, request for a special use permit number 28, kennel in A1 Agricultural District on a parcel generally situated in section 16 of Norton Township. Petitioners are Cheryl L. and Jeffrey D. Brooks, property owner and applicant.
Kelly, could you switch us over, please? All right, on the screen up there is a map of the property. This property is located in Norton Township. I think it's about 3 miles south of the village of Reddick. It's on a township road, and the nearest neighbor is about a half a mile away from this location. Mrs. Brooks, Mr. Brooks is deceased now, but Mrs. Brooks would like to turn the building to the north on the property into a dog kennel for grooming and the boarding of dogs. She intends to upgrade the building to the proper codes for that use and install, I believe she said, up to 17 dog runs inside and outside of the buildings for the boarding of dogs. Zoning board heard this case on what was that, the August 12th, and voted 4-0 to approve the recommend the approval of the special use permit for the kennel.
Do we have a limit of how many dogs can be in a situation? It depends on the building.
We do not. It is the kennel has to be licensed by the Illinois Department of Ag, and they may have limits. It has to be inspected and licensed by them.
Okay, Mr. Washington.
Question. You recall the fire up in Peatone, the kennel fire, And I think there was might have been some legislation mentioned about having someone in residence at all times on the property. Did that get brought up at all?
No, that was not brought up. I was not aware of a kennel fire.
Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is a new state law that any kennels have to have a sprinkler fire suppression system. And so that would, I don't know if that has to be, how do I put this? If it's a Department of Ag regulation, does that need to be in our zoning? Or should it be in the zoning to support a Department of Ag regulation? That's something new than probably when this was passed, because it was just signed, I believe, a
Right.
couple of weeks ago.
In my opinion, that stands on its own and it's above and beyond. What we are looking at here now is the suitability of this site for a kennel.
Mhm.
The requirement of fire suppression systems would be part of the building code or the Illinois Department of Ag's requirements, which would be above and beyond our requirements. So just because the board would give them a special use permit today for this, they still have to meet all of the other codes and regulations.
I guess that answers my second question is if we do this special use, then it's all subject to the positive inspection and approval from Department of Ag.
Yes.
Okay.
And you could put that, it's a special use permit, so you could add that as a condition to the approval that they must, as you just said, receive their approval from the Illinois Department of Ag
And provide that to the
and
county.
provide that to us, yes.
I think that's a good idea. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels.
Okay, Mr. Featherling?
I have a question about the limitation about how many animals you can have there. Is there, with special use?
That would be under Department of Ag.
Well,
We don't
yeah.
regulate it, the Department of Ag does.
Right. That subject did not come up at the hearing. The zoning board chose not to put any limitations on it.
Because they could say they're gonna put 17 kennels there and put 100 of them there, and you got a different situation, a lot of traffic,
That is true. I'm just
If
telling you
we-
what their testimony was.
create movements every day. and
Would we
everything.
stipulate that has to be followed, the Department of Ag restrictions?
Yes. I think that, I
All
think
right.
that's a,
You're making the motion, Mr. Wheeler?
would it be
Or-
just on the amendment? Is the motion on the amendment to put that
Yes.
stipulation and we're not voting on the issue?
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Washington seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay, this requirement of having someone on the premises, a resident, that doesn't mean there has to be someone on the premises at all times. It means they have to have a resident there. Mr. Smith,
The announcement from the governor's office said in the facility 24/7.
in the facility 24/7. Wow. Well,
It would be the Department of Ag's,
is there a limit of how many animals? I mean, if you got, you have to, if you have 10 or more, or 20 or more, or one. And well, we don't know,
that would be for the Department of Agriculture
Right.
to regulate.
right? We've covered that,
We don't.
so we've got that in our process. Any other questions? Motion to approve. We need a motion to approve. Mr. Smith. Mr. Zenz. No, not Zenz. Swanson. Okay.
Trade nameplates today.
Yes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. All right. Going on, ZBA case 1909. Request for a variance to section 121-99 side yard setback in the A1 agricultural district on a parcel generally situated in section 32 of Salina Township. Petitioner is Synergy Seeds Incorporated, property owner and applicant.
Synergy Seeds is, has a facility that's located right on Route 17 at Herscher Road. It's, there's a map of it on the screen there. They would like to build another warehouse building similar to the one that's on the north side of the property, right next to it to the east. In order to accomplish this, they cannot meet the 30-foot side yard setback required by our ordinance and would like that to be reduced to 14 feet. The zoning board of appeals heard this case on August 12th as well and also voted to recommend approval 4-0.
Question, you're saying next to that north building?
Yes, the building to the north running the same direction, a similar size building, right next to it to the east.
It doesn't look like there's enough room.
There is, if you give them a variance on the side yard setback.
On this, on the east side.
Yes. They looked at other locations on the property because of the flow for their trucks, the location of their septic and well. It's really the only location that they can put another building.
And they're still 15 feet after they put the building there?
Yes, and the two buildings would be 10 feet apart.
Really?
Yes, this is not a survey drawing in your packet. Well, actually, do they have the application in their packet? There is a survey in there that shows.
Okay. Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there an estimation if fire equipment can get back there? If something needs to be put out? Is there still access?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
they've got 10 feet on one side of the building, 15 feet on the other, and coming around the back side of it, they've got 30 feet.
Because they probably couldn't get in the farm field, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Based on conditions, so they would have to be able to
If
access
they had
through-
to, they could.
Really?
The entry door would be on the south side, just like the other building is.
Okay.
So,
Any other questions? Mr. Kinzinger?
It's beyond the scope probably of this conversation, but is there, if those buildings are 10 feet apart, is there provisions in our county codes for those walls to have some type of fire retardation in that they're only 10 feet apart?
no, 10 feet apart is actually the minimum to not have to have fire,
Okay.
a firewall.
Any others? Motion to approve? Mr. Federling, Mr. Wheeler with a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Home occupation ordinance amendments.
Yes. Over the past few months, I had the Regional Planning Commission look at our home occupation ordinance to see if any changes to it need to be made. In your packet, you do have a copy of the home occupation ordinance. The items at the bottom that are stricken out, there's 4 items there. That is what our current ordinance reads. Everything in yellow on that page is what would be added to the ordinance. I'd like to start with this little exercise. If you look at the screen there, would you consider all of these to be home occupations?
Is this a test?
A little bit. A little bit. I want to try to prove a point here. I would also agree that those qualify as home occupations with some limitations. So yes, but with limitations. Okay. What about that? Okay. Under our current ordinance, it is. And we've actually had one, which is what sort of prompted this. I don't believe they're in business any longer, but a company called Fat Boy Firearms on Warner Bridge Road did something very similar to this. And according to our ordinance, as long as it's attached to the house, it's part of the house. So therefore, it met the criteria of being in the house. And they built, a 4,000 square foot garage attached to the house, and we had to let them have the permit for it. So I'd like to prevent that from happening in the future. So we've tightened up the ordinance a bit, and that's where you see in the yellow there, limiting that no more than 30% of the house can be used for a home occupation.
Dang.
Cannot use any accessory dwellings or structures. Limits the number of employees and the processes and noise, odors, fumes, electrical interference, and that sort of thing. What I'm asking for today is permission to take this to the Zoning Board of Appeals so that it can be further refined and start the public hearing process. So this committee will see it again once it gets through that process.
Any questions? Mr. Siroy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Del, I know in my area there is a deer processing plant or I guess, you know, a deer processing facility in a home. And also, it used to be a gun sales place in a home. Or do you, that's not, they're not inside, they're not in the county, but they're in the village, and I think they've had permission for the village. That wouldn't interfere with anything that a village has approved,
This
would
would
it?
not apply in a municipality. This
Okay.
is unincorporated Kankakee County zoning
All
ordinance.
right, thank you.
The purpose of the home occupation ordinance is to allow residents to have some business operations within their home, but not to the extent that it's a commercial business. From the outside of the home, it should appear to still be a home, with the only indication that there's any business going on is a 2 square foot nameplate sign allowed on the structure itself.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Smith?
I guess I'm a little confused on some things. Let's use the firearm sales. In the photo you have up here, is that not the separate building that was used for the qualifications as well as the sale of some products? 'Cause
No.
I don't recognize that as being.
Well, that's not their,
attached to the
that's
house.
not their building. I could not actually, I went through all of our files. I could not find a
Oh.
file of their building. I just found one that showed a similar
Okay.
situation.
I was just gonna say, to my knowledge, that's
No,
not.
that site there, and actually they were in violation by using the external building as well on that particular one, because the home occupation only allows you to have it in your home. You cannot use any external pole barns, outdoor areas, garages.
What about the
Must be-
existing firearm sales that's in a separate small pole barn in Mr. Fairfield's district?
Well, they would be currently in violation as well. I'm not really aware of one, but we have a lot of firearm sales from homes. There's probably 10 of them in the county at least, and I'm constantly getting calls about that.
Are you familiar with the one that's off Warner Bridge Road? I think it's the Mantino Road.
No, I'm not.
No,
Oh,
it's
Fat Boys is on Warner
no.
Bridge Road.
It's Dan's Guns,
That's off
No.
DeZellum Road.
DeZelm Road.
No, it would not be compliant with our home occupation ordinance if it's in a,
Well, it's a separate building.
if it's in a building that is not in, if it's not the home. The home occupation must be in the home.
Well, okay, so he doesn't have a home occupation, he's got a
Commercial building.
commercial building or whatever.
Well, there's nothing out there that's zoned commercial, so I'd have to look into that. It could be that it is legal non-conforming and predates our ordinance. That's a possibility.
That's
It's
probably
been
it.
there forever. So.
Yes, it's been there a long time.
If that's the case, this certainly would not affect them.
Okay. Mr. Kinzinger,
I would like, when they review this ordinance, to consider the concept of health hazard in item 8I.
do you want to make that an amendment or?
I will make it as a suggestion. It's coming back to other people, but I'd like to see something about a health hazard, or at least be discussed, and why not?
All right,
There's the ordinance. So the process, yes, it will come back to you. Right now, we're requesting that this committee allow us to take it to zoning board for public hearing. After that, after it gets through the public hearing and they've revised it to and considered the entire ordinance and made any revisions that they felt is necessary, then it'll come back to planning and zoning for your review and recommendation as well, and then onto the county board for the final decision. So
okay. So we need a,
Who's that question?
Mr.
Thank you.
Wheeler.
The thought process behind what the planning commission had on the signage requirement. I'm curious, because I can see if it's a rural area, somebody may want to put a small sign in the mailbox, you know, this is it, if nobody's been there. I can understand you don't want big 12-foot signs out sitting on the road, but I'm just trying to figure out why only on the structure.
Actually, that's a carryover from our current ordinance, which is what's required there, so they made no changes to that, other than we did add the part where it would be not illuminated, flashing, or electronic display.
Sure.
So,
Because I understand the difference. If you want that, it's commercial. If you want to do a big sign, you want to build a building, change your zoning to commercial or apply.
Right.
But
Yeah, the idea here is we want residents to have the ability to have some revenue generating activities in their home, but not a full commercial operation. If they want a full commercial operation, they should get a building in the commercial district.
And that allows a lot more restrictions.
I can see the signage part of it. These can be in a rural subdivision, or yeah, I can see where, yeah, a small sign on a building on a 5-acre parcel out in the country might not be noticeable. But in the middle of a 50 by 150 lot in a subdivision where you could still have a home occupation, a sign out in the front yard would certainly be noticeable.
Maybe we just recommend that they take a look at that.
Okay.
As well. And if you base it on lot size or something.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
What's the permitting requirement for this?
If you meet the criteria, you can do it. There's no permit required unless your building needs upgrades in order to accomplish it, in which case you would need building permits.
Okay. For all these small beauty shop operations that are in the residences, how are you gonna know?
Well, sometimes we don't. Sometimes they just, many of them just pop up and we don't know about them at all. Until we get a complaint from the neighbors and then we go investigate.
So they're not applying for a home occupation permit?
There is no permit to apply for. We did actually, when we went to the Regional Planning Commission with it, we actually did have language to do that, and they felt that that was cumbersome to make people come in and get a yearly license or a permit to operate their business. And of course, staff time and fees involved. So we removed that. We could certainly revisit that if you would like.
No, I think it's overreach.
Okay. Yes.
Is there any fire requirements? I mean, we don't.
Well, that would be at the time of a lot of them do need building permits for upgrades. Even the hair salons have to do electrical upgrades and things like that. So it's meant to be a minor use of the property.
This can't come back on us for some negligence on their part.
I do not believe so. You'd have to consult the state's attorney for that, but they have reviewed this.
Okay, they have, okay. All right, do we need to vote
Oh,
on this?
excuse me, no, not this one. It will be going to review for them as
Right.
well, so.
So we're sending this on, we need a motion to do that?
Yes, that
As
would-
we do, okay. Is there a motion, Mr. Kinzinger, Mr. Washington? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Cannabis dispensary discussion. Smoke them if you got them, George.
Zoning for cannabis. As you are all probably aware, Illinois passed the Illinois Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, which will be going into effect January 1st of 2020. Prior to that, in 2013, we had the Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Pilot Program Act, which at that time prompted us to review our ordinance and make some changes to that. At that time, we added language for marijuana cultivators and dispensaries, which read like this. They are allowed in the I-1, I-2 districts as special use permits, and that's about all the language that we added at that time, because the state statute clearly specified setbacks from schools, churches, and various other uses, and a lot of the siting location. The new act does not specify that, so we felt that it is time that we need to take a look at our ordinance so that we can be in line when it becomes effective on January 1st. Some things that we need to consider. I have not drafted any changes to the ordinance yet. I wanted to get some feedback from the committee as to which direction to go. One is what districts would be appropriate. As I said, they are currently in our I-1 and I-2 districts as special use permits. If you feel that we should also include that into the commercial districts, that we would certainly write the language to include that. It is my opinion that the county board should still keep them as special use permits regardless of which district they put them in, because that gives you a lot of control over the approval of the locations, and allows you to put special conditions on it based on that location, such as hours of operation or things like that. If it's a permitted use, then it is allowed by right, and the county board does not get nearly as much say in the siting of the facility. Proposed.
Mr. Featherling,
Delbert, if this is, required in a commercial district, if we go to a commercial instead of just the industrial, which is, most buildings aren't really set up for that in the regular commercial areas. A commercial district, you got a building right next door, building behind you, or all the setbacks that you have in there won't work for commercial areas, though.
They may not. It would be up to the developer, owner, to find a location that does work. Got to keep in mind the county currently does not have a lot of industrial or commercial areas, and the likelihood of one of these being in unincorporated Kankakee County is probably pretty slim, because they want to be where the population centers are. But to cover the county, we should have it in our ordinance so we can regulate it if it were to occur. In fact, the largest commercial district we have is east of Momence. It's an old campground, about 1.5 miles east of Momence. Probably not a great location for a marijuana dispensary. No.
Mr. Kinzinger. Mike, please.
This is a proposed zoning ordinance to reflect current. This is a zoning ordinance proposed that tends to cooperate with the state present ideas regarding marijuana. From my personal opinion, and for those that I represent, I think that we should leave our zoning ordinance the way it is and treat an application as a special use, understanding that the state law takes precedence. I'd like to see everything left the way it is.
The part of the problem with that, and you absolutely could, the state law doesn't address some of the local siting concerns that you or your constituents may have. The old statute did, I believe it was 1,000 feet from a school, church, daycare. The new statute does not have any of that.
We have that presently though, don't we?
No. We did not put it in our ordinance because we didn't have to. The state statute covered it for us.
Oh, then okay. I tend to be more restrictive rather than less restrictive when it comes to the county requirements.
So now it is on the county board to determine what they think is appropriate. So, if you let me go through these, and then I can tell you what the staff's recommendations are on some of them. So, which districts would you like it in? It is totally up to the county board. If you'd like it in the residential districts, we can put it in there as well. I would not recommend that, but you can put it in any of our districts. You can decide if it's a permitted use or a special use permit. Things like lot size. The minimum lot size in both the industrial and commercial districts are 20,000 square feet. We feel that that is appropriate. Our current ordinance for the industrial district does limit it to a 2-acre minimum. We didn't really see a need for that for dispensaries. That seems like taking a lot of land out of agricultural production or other uses that was unneeded. So we feel the 20,000 square foot lot minimum, if you choose with the commercial and industrial districts, would be appropriate. And we are recommending that they be added to the commercial district as special use permits as well. Should it be set back from other uses that may be affected by that, such as religious facilities, schools, parks, playgrounds, daycare centers, or any other uses that you would deem appropriate? And what would that appropriate setback be? Staff believes 1,000-foot setback would be appropriate, which is what the old state statute had in it. Now, what would those uses be? You could go with the ones we have listed there, you could add some to it, or you could take some away. I said I'm looking for direction. We have not written the ordinance yet. I'm looking for direction on which way to go. You will obviously see this again once the ordinance has been drafted.
Mr. Featherling.
Do you have some copies of what other counties have done this? Everybody's going through it at the same time.
They're all going through it right now, so I don't know that anybody has actually finalized anything. There's a lot of discussion on,
Because I don't know how you can possibly not allow it in a commercial area except for the 1,000 feet where you had the 10,000 square foot, was that lot size or building size?
20,000 square foot lot size.
20,000 square foot lot size in a commercial area probably isn't gonna happen. So everybody will be coming in for variance.
Well, you certainly could. The county board has authority over zoning, and you have a lot of leeway on what you can allow and not allow.
And my other question is, do we have to allow it at all?
No. You could choose not to.
A lot of the towns have chosen not to allow dispensaries.
But it is best to allow it somewhere. It, well, similar to adult uses, you're better off to have it listed in your ordinance somewhere, even if it's not most ideal place for the developer. It can make your case stronger in court if you get sued to have it in the ordinance rather than not.
Somebody can sue you if you say that we don't want any dispensary?
Because it's a
If you
state
don't
law.
have it in your ordinance and somebody wants to put it in, generally, their thinking is if it's not in the ordinance, I can do it.
Well, how do some of the southern states disallow it, alcohol on Sundays and things when states allow it on Sundays?
I am in no way an expert on laws in other states, so I
Well, I'm
couldn't,
just saying, if
wouldn't
there's
speak to
a
that.
restriction on it in our county, then you wouldn't have to worry about trying to be so restrictive on the ordinance that you have in place. We already had the medical one approved, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to allow the dispensaries.
That is true, you don't have to.
Mr. Assistant Chairman, I'm going with the chairman first.
I can answer those questions because I've got the act here in front of me. And I'll read it. This paragraph speaks to what Mr. Fredling just said and other questions that may come up. Any non-home rule county within the unincorporated territory of the county may enact reasonable zoning ordinances or resolutions regulating cannabis business establishments as long as the ordinances or resolutions are not in conflict with the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. That said, no unit of local government, including home rule unit or any non-home rule unit county, the unincorporated territory of the county may prohibit home cultivation or reasonably prohibit the use of cannabis authorized by the act. And again, the cultivation is just for the medical. Those are the only ones who can cultivate is medical. Any non-home rule county within the unincorporated territory of the county may enact ordinances to prohibit or significantly limit cannabis business establishments location. So you can limit or eliminate that from the county. And that's the purview, and that's why I asked Dell to bring this here, because you can say, we don't want it anybody anywhere in the unincorporated areas of the county. Okay, so you have that right to enact that ordinance. I even have a sample ordinance for that, and I also have the sample ordinance for what we're gonna say as far as the limitation, and that's totally the board's decision. What you do then is you basically say that it's not gonna be in the unincorporated areas, it's just gonna be in the municipalities at that point. So you're not eliminating cannabis in the county, you're just saying that the tax revenue will go to the municipalities who do that.
And that takes it off our,
It would take, then we don't
Purview.
have to do any zoning. The cultivation facilities, I think, would still stay, but they're only giving one of those. So what if the one closes here and they have another one that's gonna be sited and we have an industrial location? Because we did have that at that time when we were doing the cultivation. There was a few
Actually
of them
had
that were
3
out there.
sites.
There was 3 sites and one of them was in the county. So I'd recommend that stays if you decide that we don't wanna do dispensaries in the county at all. If that's the recommendation to the full board, that's one thing, but just realize what you're doing is for all future opportunities, there will be, the tax revenue will go to a municipality because that's the only place they can locate. And which is probably gonna happen anyway. I don't see them going to the county regardless. But do you wanna shut the door now or do you wanna leave it open and make a decision on a case-by-case basis?
Mr. Serois.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, this is just a crazy question. Can we propose an annual special use permit fee on these dispensaries? I mean, there would be having to be renewed annually? I mean, that.
I don't believe
what,
so.
What Mr. Wheeler just stated, we get a little gray area. Can we have any annual permit fees if it's in our area? And then secondly, I don't believe 100 feet or 1,000 feet setback from schools is enough. That's just my personal opinion.
The fee would be a deviation from our normal procedure for special use permits. I believe I would want to send that to the state's attorney for an opinion.
Could we
as to
have a
whether we
special
could do
use
that or
permit
not.
for this particular dispensary?
Typically,
Or is
once a special use permit is issued, it is issued,
Like
providing the,
like a cannabis special
business
use
continues.
permit? We'd have to call it something different, but
yeah, a registration.
yeah, registration.
I don't think I'd call it a special use permit.
I just,
I like the idea of sending it to the municipalities myself, but Mr. Federling,
Yeah, I have concern with the ability to us to secure things like that out in the country. How are you gonna have that out in the country and somebody breaks into it every week and steals everything out of it? How are you gonna send a sheriff out there every time somebody?
That was gonna
breaks
be
into a place?
my next slide here, but in the old statute, it actually had specific security measures that they must put in place and that they must adhere to. The new one does not.
But
So-
I mean, I seem to think that that's gonna be your number one issue.
Oh, it does? Is there some in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
In order to be licensed, you have to have 24-hour security.
Well, the other one was a lot more in depth. They had, their deliveries had to be at different schedules and
no drive-through.
using empty trucks, so you wouldn't know which truck had the actual product in it. It was pretty
Up.
intense. So that this one just requires 24-hour security.
Oh, gee.
So another thing to think about is what other restrictions should be imposed. Our current ordinance says property cannot be shared with other businesses, so you can't put it in the strip mall with the restaurant and the tobacco sales or the vacuum cleaner shop. It had to be its own freestanding building. Do you want to still do that? It's up to the board. You want to consider any hours or days of operation limitations, signage, exterior facades.
If it's limited to municipalities, then it's a non-issue for us, correct?
Correct. If the county decides they do not want them in the unincorporated area at all, then really it's a pretty easy ordinance to write.
Mr. Federling,
Technically, every farming house or whatever in the county could be a dispensary, the way the ordinance is set up there. Where you got that like
Well,
that?
there's no ordinance set up yet.
Well, I
so
mean,
no.
the way you're showing it, you know, is it to come back through.
These are just
Suggestion.
suggestions of things to think about before I write the ordinance.
How much of that money from that $212 million they expect to make at the state is gonna actually come back to the county?
I have no idea.
Is it like the sales
I
tax
don't.
where you get a couple cents back on a 7 cents or whatever on sales tax?
I don't know.
Thank you. The tax discussion is a different one for the finance committee, but it is relevant if you even want to consider this. The county can impose up to a 3.75% tax if it's in the county. Municipalities are limited at 3. We get 0.75% of the municipal tax revenue. So if one locates in any one of the municipalities, we get 0.75% of the 3% sales tax that they charge. There's also all kinds of, you know, if you're gonna do an application, I believe it's like $50,000 to even apply. You have to have $100,000 security per year to donate to charity. I mean, there's all these regulations for the ones who are gonna operate and own the dispensaries. But as far as the tax revenue, if we don't have one in the county, we would, and somebody wants to put one there, then you would lose out on the opportunity for 3.75% sales tax. And I don't know that that is going to make or break the county's finances, but to the point of what we're talking about, if you want to have a vote today to say, do we even want one or not want one, that will provide some direction to Dell to be able to formulate what to do. So if this committee feels like we don't even want it in the county, unincorporated areas, then it's really easy. We stick with what we got in the cultivation facilities and then we add that in. We probably have to codify the fact that that's an unallowed
We would
use.
put a mention in the ordinance that marijuana dispensaries are not allowed in unincorporated Kankakee County.
So it seems appropriate to have that discussion first and then move on to
Okay.
the rest.
Mr. Smith, before,
On behalf of my constituents, I'd like to make a motion we not allow it in the county.
a motion has been made to not allow it in the unincorporated area. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Fairfield. Any discussion? Ms. Peters, are you growing hemp?
No, no, I'm
That's
not.
actually different.
And I
I know,
actually
I
sort
know.
of agree with these guys that I would like to not see it here, but I don't think as this smaller committee, I think that we should let Dell go forward with, you know, working on the new regulations and then bring them to the full county board. And I think that we should put it out there to our constituents. What do they think? But overall, I've seen, you know, the bad things happen with all the gambling, and I just think that's going to compound the issue. But I think that we should fully air it instead of being beat up in the newspaper that we just killed it. So, but have a little more discussion with a bigger group.
Well, that would take place even if we recommended it, that it not be. I mean, we're just, right, that it go to the full board.
So this.
The recommendation not to have them in unincorporated Kent County would have to go to the full board
Okay.
after this committee.
All right, no,
Okay.
I agree.
Mr. Kinzinger,
I tend to agree with Ms. Peters, even though I am personally opposed and believe those that I represent are opposed. I would much rather see us with a restrictive cannabis sale and a special use permit required. We don't know what's going to transpire. To say no to something is sometimes dangerous. To say yes is sometimes dangerous. And so I tend to agree with Ms. Peters that maybe we should let them go forward, understanding that we want it very restrictive, and see what happens. But I can be swayed.
anyone else? Mr. Smith?
Just as a position to sway Mr. Kinzinger and colleague in the back, if you look at the northern suburbs and what they're doing now, they're by a significant majority, village by village, city by city, saying no, not in our community. And that's what I get the feedback from the west end of the county.
Okay,
The hemp notwithstanding, because that is out there.
right. We have a motion on the floor. Mr. Washington, you have a comment.
Just this. The animal that you know is much more controllable than the animal that you don't know. That's it.
What animal do you know?
The animal of cannabis.
Okay. Anyone else? Ready for a vote? Up. Mr., did you write that down? You want to have him restate it? Okay.
It's,
Mr. Smith,
motion would be to not recommend or not allow cannabis operations in the
an
unincorporated
unincorporated
areas.
area. And leave it up to the municipalities.
We don't have control over them.
Right,
And I think, as you stated before, that's where they're gonna go if they go anyway.
right. Okay, Mr. Seroyes?
Just a part of the discussion. I just don't want our board to turn away revenue that maybe we would be able to capture, even though the municipalities approve it. It would be money that we're saying no to. And I understand everybody's feelings towards it. I completely understand everybody's feelings, but it's revenue that we could capture in this county too. I just want to put that out there. We're saying no to money also, as if that's the case.
We would be getting 0.75 if the municipalities do it, is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So, it's a little. Ms. Peters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify though, if I vote yes, then does that not allow Dell to go forward putting some things together? as he's
Well,
requesting.
he would put together that it would not be in the unincorporated area, and then the county board would discuss it and come to a conclusion. It's just coming to the county board with a recommendation that we don't have it in the unincorporated area. Okay, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, you ready for the vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Oltoff? Mr. Featherling?
Nay.
Mr. Washington?
Nay.
Mrs. Polk?
Nay.
Ms. Peters?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson?
Nay.
Mr. Wheeler?
Nay.
It is a tie. What happens now?
A suggested resolution?
Yes.
How about we have, the recommendations put down, and then the county board, you know, we come back here. Would this have to go to ZBA?
Yes,
First.
if we're gonna change the ordinance, it must go to the zoning board for a public hearing.
Okay. The county board will still get the chance to say, no, we don't want it on a full vote. So they will still get that opportunity, so I think what, a
We
resolution could be put together what it is, go to ZBA.
We
Come
send it
back
on
here.
without a recommendation.
Well, yeah, we send it, we have him prepare it, but we'll still come back here, and then we could vote on it again, and it could be the same thing. We could say we want to vote again not to allow it, or to not recommend, or whatever happens. But this allows him to do the work that could be considered by ZBA, this committee, and then the full board. The full board could say, we don't want them in the unincorporated areas, or we want to amend what's there, or whatever. So that possibility still exists. It seems like if it's a tie, let him do the work.
I can put the ordinance together, we can run it through the public hearing process, see what the zoning board has to say about it, and come back to the county board after that, and
We're
Well,
gonna
here-
have option one.
planning and zoning, and then county board.
You're gonna have option one and option two? Is that,
Well, there's always option one or option two, you can
Okay.
either do it or not do it, and if
Okay.
you're going to do it, here's what you should do.
Mr. Featherling?
Does that
Sorry.
seem reasonable?
Raise another question. Is there any way we can do a little research on some other towns? Like if I call or you call, or other counties, if you call Lake County or McHenry or somebody and ask them what they're doing, you know any guys in other counties that have decided what they're gonna do?
I know plenty, in fact, we're on an email list where
Group.
a group list where I hear about all of them.
Uh-huh.
Everybody who's on that list, and I don't think anybody has really finalized anything yet, but there are some that are saying no, there are some that are embracing it. It's
Well,
across the board, so.
'cause it's not gonna happen till January anyway, but it's gonna take them a couple, 2-3 months to get it together, so.
Since their ordinances are different than our ordinances, especially municipal ordinances, it's not necessarily a comparison, so I have to make it work for our ordinance.
Okay.
All right. Who? Oh, sorry, Mr. Washington.
Have we considered contacting other states, other counties in other states that have these conditions going on?
I have not.
Like Colorado?
One thing to consider is that the other states that have this, the counties and the municipalities, I'm trying to think of a better term than ran wild, but they actually did put a lot of taxation on top of it, of what the state had done, and it actually expanded the black market. And so the dispensaries lost business to the people right down the street for the same type of product. So that's why they limited the taxes in Illinois, was to try to protect the legal tax stream versus the black market. And so I think to answer your question, if you were to look at what other states are doing, it might not be apples to apples in that regard.
That's like-
Because zoning and then taxation is way different than what we're doing here in Illinois.
Zoning is very localized, each state handles zoning differently.
Yeah.
So to be able to compare to another state is almost impossible, really. But I can look around our state and see what's happening there a little closer.
Tied up. And just to let everybody know that the next question will be the financial side of it, the taxation side, what we want to do as a county, because it doesn't have to be 3.75, but why go through that if we've already decided we don't want it? That's why I started with the zoning part. Then once this is decided, I'll come back to the board and say, well, there's no need to do it, so there won't be anything to come back to the board with as far as.
Has there been any requests for dispensaries in the non-incorporated area?
I've had phone calls.
You have?
I've had phone calls, no actual requests,
Okay.
but I know of at least 3 phone calls where there are landowners considering it.
All right, Mr. Washington?
Looking at the financial condition that the county is in now, and looking at where we've been, is it not foolish to want to turn down any legitimate source of income to build the county's resources from this point on?
The term comes to me, can we be bought? And, well, I have strong feelings on it, and the committee has decided to have Dell go forward with the proposal, and then bring it to the county board, or it'll come back to us. It'll go to ZBA and then back to us, and then to the county board.
So I will draft an ordinance.
The pleasure of everybody. Is that all right? All right. Going on, hazard mitigation plan grant opportunity.
All right, if you recall, a few months back, the county board approved our hazard mitigation plan, and the next step as part of that plan was to send it to FEMA and IDNR for their approval. We did not get that approval. They would like to see a lot more analysis done within the plan. There are some parts that are not up to the standards they'd like to see them. So they would like us to revisit that. They are offering a grant opportunity to help us do that. The grants start October 1st. I'm still talking with the folks at DNR about whether we actually need a consultant or how far we need to go with this. But I thought, just to make sure I have all of my ducks in a row, I would ask the county board for permission to move forward with applying for the grant when it becomes available, in case we may need it. That's going to need to go to the finance committee next week, so I'm really bringing it up here just as a informational for this committee.
Is there a motion? Ms. Peters, seconded by Mr. Washington. It's nice to have the vice chairman also. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Kankakee River Valley Enterprise Zone, City of Kankakee.
I will turn it over to Ben to talk about this.
This is a whirlwind meeting here. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you this morning. So this one's kind of off the presses. We just received the agreement to the chairman probably a little over an hour ago now. The Enterprise Zone Fund is managed for the jurisdictions by the county, and the board met on August 6th, and a request was made by the City of Kankakee to further implement some of the riverfront development project. And they requested of the Enterprise Zone Board $37,000 for a new website, for a landing page for the site, and some, what the agreement in front of you is, bridge lighting design for the bridges over the Kankakee River. After some deliberation from the board, Mr. Chairman sits on the board, each of the chief elected officials sits on the board. They decided to authorize an expenditure of $30,000 of the enterprise zone funds for the City of Kankakee's project. They will make up the $7,000 or so difference for the project. We're bringing this to you today because the expenditure will actually, the contract will be with the county, and we will receive an invoice for the work. So it will be paid out of what is our general fund, and then we will backfill with the finance department out of the enterprise zone account to refill the general fund. Because of the way our bill payment is structured, we wanted to make sure that we went through the proper protocol, because a check to two consultants really on behalf of the City of Kankakee, but through the enterprise zone funds, will be made. Currently in the fund, there's $273,000 in one account, and then we have a separate account which we are able to write checks on, which has about $7,000 in it. So there's about $280,000 in the account right now, and the request was made and approved for $30,000. We just wanted to make sure that through PZA that you're aware of why it's being spent, and then we would be able to authorize the chairman to make that expenditure for this project.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Ben, would you say, who was on the committee that said that it was a good idea to spend $30,000?
So this is Kankakee, Bradley, Bourbonnais, Herscher, Aroma Park, and Kankakee County.
So the 5 leaders, there's 6?
Yes, it's the 5 mayors and the chairman.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
On the back page, billing rates, is that per hour?
Yeah, that's their per hour. So the money comes from fees collected by the county for projects within the enterprise zone. So part of the analysis the board did, just kind of anecdotally, Kankakee County has had probably 30 projects in the last 3 years and contributed around $70,000 to this fund. So these are projects that are done Tractor Supply, applied for enterprise zone benefit. The county received a check. Actually, Michelle does the building materials exemption certificates. We do the reporting at the county level for the zone. So the funds are coming in. The lion's share of the funds come in from the county with CSL and Nucor, obviously, but these are all contributed by the jurisdictions. So when they made a request, I don't want to say it's their money, but because it has a regional significance, having an improved riverfront, I believe the board found a reason to authorize some of the expenditure for this kind of continuation of this project.
Okay. First there was here, but I'll go to Mr. Featherling.
You have to pay somebody $30,000 to pick lights for on the river?
So this is just a portion of this. Is about $12,000 for the lighting design, and this design will give it'll be the 3 bridges, so the railroad bridge and then the 2 street bridges over Kankakee County or Kankakee Riverside.
Isn't there a committee or something that's in charge of that could get together and pick stuff out?
Mr. Wheeler.
I just have to reemphasize, we're not spending county money here.
Right.
This is money collected through the enterprise zone fund that's authorized by the mayors. So all we're doing is authorizing me to sign the check, but the money's actually coming from the enterprise zone fund. We keep that in an online account. I just want to make sure this is not any taxpayer resources collected through levies. Complete pass-through. So I don't know, getting into the micro of it, the enterprise zone already board said, yeah, we can devote some resources towards these 2 initiatives for the city of Kankakee. We're just signing and handling the money for it. Yeah.
Will the bike bridge be lit too?
Actually, the proposals, and I'm not kidding when I say this, probably around an hour ago the proposal came through, so I haven't really reviewed all 15 or 16 pages of it. But yeah, the plan was to cover I thought the 3 bridges.
Okay.
Just the plan, not the equipment.
Okay. Mr. Siroy.
It sounds like it's gonna look nice after it's done, so I agree with this. Yeah, so, thanks.
Glad to have your input. Okay. Do we need a vote on this?
Yeah, we'll be spending money.
It doesn't say, but that's okay. Well, roll call vote, please. Has there been motion?
No.
No. Is there a motion? Mr. Kinzinger, Mr. Washington? Roll call vote.
Mr. Olthoff?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Peters?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Smith? Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Thank you. Going on to 2019 CLG grant, authorizing county board chairman to sign agreement with consultant.
Michelle will be presenting this one.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Back in March of this year, this committee approved the Historic Preservation Commission to apply for CLG. In July 2nd, we were awarded that grant. It's to do the Momence Township survey of historic sites and properties. So I'm just asking for permission for the chairman to sign an agreement with WJE and Associates. They're the same consultants we use for the Pilot Township survey. It's a 70-30, it's 31,000 total grant. 21,700 is for the consultant, 9,300 is our share, but all that will be in-kind services, which will be the volunteers of the Historic Preservation Commission and my staff time.
Motion to approve. Mr. Washington, Mr. Fairfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. GIS, aerial photography.
Yes. Every 5 years, the GIS gets new aerial photography done, and our last aerial flyover was in 2015, so we are getting geared up to purchase another aerial flyover for spring of 2020. In your packet is a request for proposals from aerial photography companies to start soliciting proposals to perform that service. I will be taking this to finance next week as well, but I wanted to let this committee know, since this is the committee that oversees the GIS department, what we were up to. So in your packet is the proposal. If you turn to page 7, we are asking the consultants to give us prices on 4 different options. We currently have 6-inch pixel size on our aerial photography. We are asking for a quote for 3-inch pixel size, which would almost double the resolution for the photography, which means that when you zoom in, you can actually see the top of the manholes. In some cases, read the lettering on them. It's very nice. And 2 of the other options also include oblique imagery, which is where the during the flyover they also take side images of every picture, and then they drape that over a 3D model of buildings, so you could actually see a 3D aerial image of buildings and the ground. And there's a couple of different breakouts on that to save on cost, where we just do the oblique imagery in the urban area and not the rural area, because 3 dimensions of a cornfield really doesn't make a lot of difference. So we're gonna put those out there. We Huh? What's that?
You could only.
Oh. Well, I think we all know what a corn stalk looks like in 3D.
What about a cow?
And it really doesn't help anybody, but the 3D imagery of the buildings would certainly allow emergency services to know what they're coming to before they get there.
Well,
they could pull it on up on their computer, know where the doors are, the windows are, points of access. It would be, I think, invaluable to them. So we are asking, we don't know yet that we can afford that. So, but we're asking for them to give us prices on that. We believe that this is going to cost the county anywhere from about $120,000 to $240,000, depending on. And when I say county, I do mean the GIS fund, which is a special fund for this operation.
Do we have grants for that?
No, we have a special fund for that. Every deed that is recorded in the recorder's office provides us money. It comes out to about between $15,000 and $20,000 a month, and we've been stockpiling it for several years. We currently have about $722,000 in that account. Now that sounds like a lot of money, but once we're done with the aerial photography, we've got to go pay for the planimetrics next, because you do that off of the new aerial photography. That'll be another $100,000 to $200,000 most likely. That's what this money has been saved for. And of course, as soon as we get this done, we'll start saving for the next round 5 years from now. So that's what we're asking for. There are some things in the works right now that might help offset our cost. The new NG 911, I don't know if everybody understands what that is, the new next generation 911 system that the state is mandating that the 911 people put together. They offered a grant to take our GIS data and make it compatible with the new NG 911 system. We've currently applied for that grant through Tammy Peterson. She's the one who applied for it, but that looks like that's going to be an $80,000 grant there. And we just recently learned that they are intending to open up money for aerial photography as well. We do not have the details on that yet as to what pixel resolution they'll pay for or how much, but we could get part of this paid for by them. So right now I want permission to move forward with the RFP so that it's ready to go. It has been reviewed by the state's attorney. In fact, I got their letter back yesterday saying it was fine with them, so that I can pull the trigger on it when I need to, if I need to. We need to start looking at getting the RFPs out in about October so that we can have somebody lined up in January. The flight needs to occur March or April of 2020.
Mr. Washington.
I've been on the committee for some time, and this period that exists now between the last aerial photographs and now has been the most significant growth that I've seen in the improvement of equipment. They're doing things now that was just dreamed about, maybe even not even dreamed about 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So this, to me, it's very important for us to get this done and get it done as most economically that we can.
And the
Okay.
price has come down.
Mr. Kinzinger,
I want to piggyback.
microphone.
I want to piggyback with what George stated and indicate that we've been doing it every 5 years. And I'm not saying this RFP is wrong, but should we, or are there other ways of doing this would be more current? Because the world is changing fast. We've had the internet since 1996, and 5 years is a long time in this kind of stuff. Is there something that we could do now with this RFP? And I'm beyond my pay grade again, but I'm just asking the question.
In order to meet our April deadline, probably not. There are starting to become companies and products out there where you get a much quicker turnaround on your aerial photography, where it's more of a subscription base. You pay a fee every year and you get new photography just about every year. Those are fairly new to the market though, and I don't believe they've been tested out well as to how all that works. So we're recommending that we do this now, and there's nothing that says we can't get this photography now and 2 years from now go into a subscription base. We do not have to necessarily wait the next 5 years. That would be based on revenue.
How often is Google Earth updated?
Well, they don't have the resolution necessarily that we're looking at here. It's all over the place. They're purchasing aerial photography. Most likely they will purchase aerial photography once we have this. They will purchase it from those vendors as well.
It's amazing what Google Earth does. I mean, as far as coming down on a house and then going sideways and looking at the front.
Well, that would be the obliques we're talking about.
Okay.
Okay, that would be built into our GIS, so you'd have all of our parcel information. And
What
all of
is
that
their
along with
pixels, you know?
it. Depends on where you're at in the country. There's
Okay.
some of them are very, like 12-inch pixels. Others are down to 3 inches. To let you know some of the pricing, currently 6-inch pixels for county-wide coverage would cost us about $60,000 or $70,000. 3-inch pixels would be in the $120,000 range, and what takes it up to that $240,000 range is if we want the obliques with it.
Do we ever use Google Earth in our GIS?
No.
No.
No. You have to pay them if you want to link it to it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's a lot of limitations with that.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. I'm just trying to save money. Mr. Fedling.
I'd like to make a motion, we have Dell go ahead and proceed with this.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Washington. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Oops, do we need we aren't spending it yet.
That'll actually come at the Finance Committee.
Okay. All right. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carried. Rural transit we don't have because Jeff is.
No, Ben is going
Oh,
to take care of
okay.
that.
Thank you, sir. So relatively straightforward on this one. I guess the only thing I want to just make very clear is when we talk about Q4, state's fiscal year starts on July 1st. So this is a Q4 fiscal 2019. So that is between April 1st and June 30th of this year. So it's the most recent full quarter. Rides are at 11,915 trips. That's a 34% increase. There's about 46,000 people that ride the Kankakee Rural Transit System. And I think probably the most poignant part of that's a 25% increase over last year. If I'm pulling out just kind of quick stats for you, the one I would give to you is 18,937 trips on commuter on the Moments bus. So for rural transit, we're offering a deviated fixed route between the city of Kankakee, Aroma Park, and Moments for the job segment, and we call it the Eastern Job Section, and we're doing about nearly 20,000 trips for jobs on the system. The current grant is not anywhere near matched. The program runs on about $660,000. It's required the state, federal, and local match provisions. We get about $1 million in state grants. So as the program builds, the expenditures that the vendor and the county will be able to access will increase because of that local contribution. The current local contribution comes from a couple of townships contribute, the county contributes, and we have a couple vendor service contracts with not-for-profits. So as those increase, so we get more contracts, we would be able to tap and access more state grant dollars. Our state grant's right around $1 million, so we, in a perfect world, could be offering $2 million of transit on a 50-50 match. So that's kind of the goal to get to, but seeing numbers like 25% increase year over, that's a really big increase for this one single year. That is all I have.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Jill, what is this?
That was part of the CLG.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Any old business? Any new business?
I just got one thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I missed the stormwater MS4 discussion, and this is for Delbert. Did Mr. Zenz approach you about any stormwater issues in his district?
No.
Okay, I will let him know that he has to approach you because I think he had some stormwater discussions in his district.
Sure.
I will send him your way. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, you don't have to wait till this meeting to let me know about it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure he doesn't understand that. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn? Ms. Peters? Ms. Polk? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.